Hello, this is Clint Locklear with Wolfer Nation, and this is for you guys out there that are really into prepping and survival. Now, I'm sitting in actually my permaculture farm here in Dunlap, Tennessee, but I do some weird things that if you're more used to a traditional garden, that you're going to think, well, that won't work because it has to be done this way. If you've never got into permaculture, looked up permaculture, studied permaculture, and you're a survivalist or a prepper, I have to ask you where your sanity card is at because you're not using it right now. Now, what I'm going to show you is, if you can see, you can, by understanding plants and nature, grow food that someone has to absolutely stumble upon before they know what it is. There's been some cheesy stuff done in the survival industry, like people just talking about food forests and stuff like that. This is nothing but a field. Like, if you can see out in my bottom pasture down there, I could be doing this out there completely random, where no one could figure out what it is. Down there towards the tree line, I could do this up against the trees. I would have to know about my sun exposure and stuff like that. But what you're looking at now is a lot of corn and a whole lot of winter squash. And if someone's just walking around a field or going down a road, think about road ditches, think about fields, think about the patterns of people. If you were worried about someone finding food that you were growing, for goodness sake, don't do the little house on the prairie garden. Do some stuff like this. Now I'm gonna walk over and show you. If I did this out in the middle of a field, the plants wouldn't care, but people wouldn't know what's going on either. So if you're into that type thing, I would pay attention to this. You can see, now I've kind of cut this down because I'm putting a cover crop in, but it's 5-foot weeds all the way around this, and then it's full of winter squash. You can grow pumpkins, you can grow regular squash, zucchinis, you could do tomatoes on the ground like this, but someone walking down the road 30 feet away would never know that you had this here, because you can let the weeds and everything grow up. Now, the way this works is pretty simple. Could be a tarp, could be a big piece of plastic, it could be anything. This happens to be a nylon belt off of a factory conveyor belt in a pulpwood factory to bring in the wood chips. That's what this is. So what I've done is I go and I cut a hole in the middle, and it's probably about 9-10 inches. And then I will pee in each one of them. Yes, urinate, because your urine is actually very safe and it's got a lot of nitrogen. And then I'll put a great big scoop of compost inside of that hole when I move this right on top of the weeds. I don't prepare anything to do this. I put my winter squash seeds in the compost and I walk away. Now, all I had to do for one time before harvest was come out in these holes, and you can see where like the grass will grow up right there. When the plants were small, I came in and weeded the grass out one time. So I only had to be here 2 times. When I planted it, when I weeded it once, just to give the plants a chance, because once they get big, they'll take care of the grass. And then I come back and I'll harvest. And I've got several of these around through here that, up until I cut all this cover crop, this Sudan grass, with a scythe, you couldn't see it unless you had a drone. If you didn't know it was here from the Jeep, you would have never known all this food was here. Already got some in the basket. I could go around. I've got them kind of in a half thing. Now, when you look at all of this, what you're now looking at now is a mixture of sorghum and corn. And I just picked a bunch of corn, which I should have left on there to show you, but there'll be some in here. Now, what I did with this is I scythed it down. I had another tarp that I put there. I left it there for a couple of weeks where all this weedy looking stuff is. I moved the tarp out because it stunted all the weed growth. I threw the corn seed on the ground, literally, just threw it on the ground. I did not plant it. I covered it with some grass clippings, and I haven't done a single thing to it. And you can see The corn doesn't care. Now, if you're really being all survivally about this, and you're going, well, corn needs a lot of nitrogen, and you can tell by these plants they're lacking just a little bit, but that's okay. If you collect your urine, you could come in and dilute it 8-to-1, so a gallon of urine be 8 gallons of fertilizer, and pour about a quart around each one of these plants, and you would have had plenty of nitrogen for this corn. But because it's sporadic, the way that it is right now, this is the point that I'm trying to show. You can see weeds being close to it didn't matter. And when I had the weeds on this side right here, you couldn't see that there was any corn at all. So I could grow all kind of crops out in the middle of a field, 30 feet away from a road, in an opening in the woods, but I'm using a tarp, or I'm using some type of belt, or I'm using plastic. And if you're worried about someone seeing it even more, you could just take, chop you down some weeds and put over top of the tarp, just so it looks more organic, so it doesn't stand out as much as this if you wanted to. But the principle stays the same. If you're, because I know there's a lot of people that think if you grow food in a survival situation, people's gonna steal it. Only if you do something stupid enough to go plant it the way people do now in their backyards in little rows. Learn your permaculture. Food should not be an issue after that point.